PowerPlayChess, brought to you in association with Kagi. I'd like to look at the game between Hikaru Nakamura and Dommaraju Gukesh from the final round of the Candidates Tournament. Now, we all know what the result of this game is. However, there were some very interesting moments that I've been analysing, and I'd like to look into the detail of it. Also, frankly, I was baffled by Nakamura's approach to this game. However, I have a hunch about Nakamura's strategy, which I'll discuss more at the end of this game. So let's dive in. So first of all, d4 from Nakamura. Well, he's been playing e4 in this tournament, so that was a little bit of a surprise. I mean, he said in his roundup video that he wanted to keep Gukesh on his toes, and thought maybe that would be a bit of a surprise for him. So we had d5 from Gukesh, who didn't seem perturbed at all. He rarely seems perturbed. And I think sound strategy. Remember, Gukesh will be happy with a draw in this game. Queen's Gambit accepted. Yep, it's a really solid option. I think an excellent choice from Gukesh in this game where he basically is happy with a draw. And this is a very interesting move because standard play here for black in the Queen's Gambit accepted is play c5 and then a6. But instead, Gukesh, and Gukesh has played like that before, but this time he played bishop e7 first. Now that's a little bit of a finesse. Now he has done this in a few games, and it's a very interesting strategy. I mean, one of the ideas is, well, he's had this by transposition. So he's played this before, a6 and then bishop e7. And, well, let me show you one of the ideas. So I'm going into some detail now. So he's delaying playing c5, which does give white the option to push in the middle. But black gains space on the queen side as usual, gets in bishop b7, and then c5, so only hits out later. And this is already a very comfortable position for black, very typical of these Queen's Gambit accepted positions. Or, for example, here's another one. In this position. So, for example, he's played like this before. Oh, this is slightly different. He hasn't played bishop e7 yet, but okay, we can see this strategy of delaying c5 and then going for this. Or let's try another one. Well, I think you get the idea by now anyway. So that's the idea, to go for a quick advance on the queen side, delay c5. So that's a little bit unusual. So bishop e7. And Nakamura admitted that he was a little bit thrown by this, which I think shows that the opening is not really Nakamura's strength. And again, he played a3, which is a little bit inaccurate. I don't think, looking at Nakamura's openings throughout the whole Candidates Tournament, I don't think he was prepared, as far as the openings go, very well. He had quirky little ideas, but that's not his main strength. He's a brilliant technician. He's very pragmatic. He loves playing with the initiative. He's a great defender. But the openings at this very highest level can let him down. And this was such a case. So he spent almost 12 minutes over a3. I think this is interesting. The Queen's Gambit accepted is a very standard opening, but he's a little bit thrown by a slightly different move order, and this is inaccurate. Let me show you why in a second. So both sides castle and a6. So it's a normal-ish position. And queen e2. So Nakamura doesn't want to get involved in something like this with a possible exchange of queens. He said that he wanted to keep the pieces on the board. Fair enough. But b5 is a good move. Standard move, of course, in these positions. And c takes d4. And Nakamura thought for almost 10 minutes and just recaptured with the pawn. He was tempted by rook d1. And he said that with hindsight he might have gone for this move. But he was worried that something like this, the position, the pawn structure would be a bit flat. But, you know, white can possibly play this one on. But there's another very interesting move, and that's b4. With this idea, which is sort of similar to the game knight c6. And that is fine for black. So it's hard to say. It's also possible to play a takes b4 and play like this for white. And then queen c7 for black. And I mean, white might be slightly better here. Anyway, Hikaru thought this was just a bit flat and instead went for the typical isolated queen's pawn position, which can be a lot of fun because the IQP carves out space for white. You know, later on, if you can play the rook to the third rank, knight to the outpost, and then swing this rook along the third rank, well, that's great fun. You know, you can have a very interesting attacking position. But this was a very clever move, b4. So yes, what am I talking about? Bishop b7, for example. I mean, this is a popular move in this particular position. But this is exactly what Nakamura wants. You know, this is a tense position. And, you know, the bishop could come out here or g5. The rook is going to swing across the board. This is fun for white. But Gukesh played b4, and this move was praised by Nakamura afterwards. It's also praised by Magnus Carlsen, who happened to be doing a bit of live commentary when this move was played, and Carlsen said this is clever. So why is this a clever move? I mean, normally, you know, we would be thinking about playing our pieces into the game. So what's the story with b4? Well, if a takes b4, which is really the move you want to play, you don't recapture with the bishop. That way is a waste of time. You bring a piece out, knight c6. That's the point. And, well, attacks this one. If rook d1, basically, you're gaining time. The knight reaches a tremendous square on b4, attacks the bishop, which has to move, and then black is really comfortable. That is a very different kind of IQP position because the knight is very well placed. This square is under control. Very hard for white to generate an attack when this knight controls d3. So, you know, something like this, you're never going to get rook d3 in because the knight controls that square. This position is not a problem for black at all. Therefore, after b4, Nakamura didn't take. Instead, he played knight e4. An exchange of pawns. Nakamura speculated after the game. He said, well, I could have gone all in like this. And then, you know, you're hoping to generate some kind of attack. And then the rook can reach the third rank. But actually, bishop b7, the bishop reaches here. And this whole thing is based on a wing and a prayer for white. White's a pawn down and black is very comfortable there. But I thought it was interesting that Nakamura said, I just didn't want to go all in. He said, you know, I didn't want to jeopardize my second place. That's very interesting. So he was actually being quite prudent and he simply recaptured. But this is a very comfortable IQP position because the queen side is open. And black is always going to get counterplay down here. It's very hard for white to generate a kingside attack when the position is so open. So something like this, knight c5, bishop d5, I mean that's a beautiful blockader, knight c6. You can see there's pressure on f3, and d4 and c5. Great position for black. So after bishop b7, the knight came back. Knight d5, that's a beautiful blockader. You can see if all the pieces are exchanged here, exactly what black wants. Already, black is for choice in this position. You can just imagine all these pieces ganging up on the d-pawn, and white has no attack whatsoever. So bishop d2 protects the knight in exchange, and knight d7. So again, if the black knight reaches f6 like this, black has stability. It's really hard for white to generate an attack here when black is so well placed. You know, this rook is on the open file. There's always counterplay. And ultimately, this is going to be a problem. You know, good blockader. Okay, so bishop b1 played. Nakamura tried to keep pieces on, but basically the moment for activity is kind of gone. Knight f6. Bishop d3, okay, that looks at the a-pawn. And Gukesh plays in a very principled way. He could have played a5 here, and that's okay for black. Although, you know, that's always a little bit vulnerable. Instead, he thought, fine, I'm just going to take that d-pawn. He's had to give up his beautiful light-squared bishop. However, a pawn, why not? Let's do it. Rook d1. Little bit of discomfort for the queen, has to end up here, but still it's fine. So Nakamura wants to stir things up. Queen b7, bishop c5, excellent move targeting this pawn. Some nice tactics here. If queen takes a6, then, well, Nakamura saw this, excuse me, and thought, well, this is too much. White is in trouble here, and he's right. In fact, queen h4 is even better. Threatening f2 with the idea bishop e1, knight g4, hitting that one and hitting that one. Terrible position. Or if g3, queen h3, threatening knight g4, and then takes, and basically this attack is fantastic for black, for example. And then, yeah, Mr. Rook comes into the game. So Nakamura is absolutely right not to take on a6, and instead played bishop e1. So he had to be prudent here, guarding f2. a5, so the pawn is safe. And again, an interesting moment. You know, you might think, well, let's keep the queens on. At least you've got two bishops. I mean, black is fine here. But Nakamura played queen b5, which basically just calms the game down. I think after this queen exchange, neither side is in trouble at all. I think it makes life easy for Gukesh. He's a pawn up. But also makes life easy for Nakamura. He's not going to lose this position with the two bishops. So this queen exchange just calms everything down for both players. Knight d5, excellent move. This shows why it's worth having an extra pawn. You might think, oh, well, this extra pawn is doing nothing. Yeah, it's a nice 4-3 majority, but you're a long way from creating a passed pawn. But here is why that's an important pawn. It gives the knight beautiful protection in the middle of the board and shuts out the rook. Splendid knight. So Nakamura just plays traditionally, bringing the king into the middle. That's what you want to do, and both sides do that. I was anticipating g5 here and possibly h5, but f5, very safe move. So Gukesh is ready to play the king to f6. Rook c4, and now we get lots of exchanges. And of course, Nakamura can draw immediately by exchanging and going in for the opposite colour bishop endgame. But instead, he keeps a little bit more tension in the game. But frankly, there's not a lot going on here. And of course, Hikaru knew that. But he wanted to keep the game going. Okay, watch out for tactics. Bishop takes, not good. Knight check, and knight takes defends the bishop. So bishop c3, yeah, bishops are beautiful, and that's why White is absolutely fine in this position, even though he's a clear pawn down, because it's very hard to fight against those bishops. If Black could exchange bishops, then the knight on its own would have a chance against the bishop. But no, 2 bishops are just too strong. And Gukesh decides, fine, I'm just going to simplify, give back my extra pawn, but now the position is really flat. There's not a lot going on here. So I'm just going to zip to the end. Well, in fact, Gukesh played e5. As Nakamura pointed out, bishop f8 would have caused a little trouble. That's threatened. The bishop defends, and then bishop g7 kind of shuts the rook out. You can't win it, though. It shouldn't make any odds. Should be a draw. King g6 can be met by bishop here, and otherwise, yeah, white's fine. Anyway, Gukesh played e5, threatening e4 and f4, so that stopped with f3. Gukesh pushed on anyway, gained some space. That shuts out the rook, which is quite nice. And okay, Nakamura simplified as well, and well, very soon more pawns were exchanged. I mean, the problem is the rook can't get out of the way to free the pawn, so Gukesh just simplifies, and we're about to head to a draw. That's necessary to guard e2, otherwise this pawn is very dangerous. Rook behind the pawn, lots of checks, another check, the king goes back. This is a very forcing move. Attacks that one, so the pawn advances, and now we've got a forced draw. Threatening rook f8, the rook goes behind, so Nakamura takes the rook, but e3 secures that bishop. And Nakamura decided, well, there's no point in going on here. You can't make any progress here, because if the king ever leaves, then e2 and e1. So Nakamura decided, fine, I'll just finish the game like that. 2 kings on the board. He went the whole way. So yes, Nakamura tried to win this game. He kept the game going and pressed Gukesh a little bit. But he certainly didn't burn his bridges in this game. Not as some were expecting. So why did Nakamura play like this? Well, it's partly because he got the opening slightly wrong, but he could have spent more time just trying to, making sure that he got some position that had more juice in it. I mean, he is white after all. But I think this slight, just keeping the brake on in the position was actually a deliberate policy. In his roundup video, at various points, Hikaru said, well, I didn't want to jeopardize second place. Well, that's interesting. So I wonder whether Nakamura has in mind that Ding Liren is not in the best place at the moment, and we don't know. This is pure speculation. But is there a chance that Ding will not be defending his title? We don't know. So I wonder whether Nakamura has in mind, well, he's reasonably placed if they need a challenger for Gukesh. So there are 3 players in second place in the candidates tournament: Nakamura, Nepomniachtchi, and Caruana. So if Ding declines to defend his title, then will there be a playoff between Nakamura, Nepo, and Caruana? We shall see. All is before us. Thanks for watching.